But I definitely think women see success differently. And often, as a founder myself, what I thought, where I realized I didn't actually want, I raised and I had VCs because that's what you do. And suddenly I didn't really want that. So I thought I had failed because I didn't want what was expected of me as a founder at market. So I think just being aware of what does success look like helps kind of create that path for female founders. It might be okay to not raise funding. You might not want to have investors on your board. You might want to. What does it look like?
Welcome everyone to episode 26 of How Would You Build It? And in spirit of Women's Month and Women's Day in South Africa, we've invited Victoria, or Vo, from WomHub. Vo, thank you for joining. Thanks for being with us this significant week.
And thank you for having me. I look forward to unpacking some chats with you.
Yeah, me too. And Rainier, my co-host, welcome back. But nice to have you with us.
Thanks, Bobby. Half a year up for our podcast. So only 6 more months until our first
that's a good point. Yeah.
Congratulations.
There we go. That's quite exciting, actually. I didn't even... Yeah. It's actually quite cool. I'm going to actually go off topic for a second. I mean, well, we're talking about, Women's Month. I don't know if you guys have been actually following, but our national sports teams, the women's teams have been highlighting this the last couple of weeks. Banyana, the soccer team and the netball team. It's actually been quite cool seeing that highlight of women in sports this last month or so. Have you guys been paying attention?
I mean, personally, for myself, not as much attention. I'd like to have watched a little bit more of the soccer in particular. I have a toddler, so waking up at ridiculous hours to watch soccer is no longer my go-to. But certainly I've been following the stories and really proud of our women, actually. Really, really exciting news coming out. And even, not just to win, but just competing and being at this level is so incredible.
Yeah. No, it's been awesome to watch. I mean, I actually understand netball now. It's really cool.
Do you understand why you can't move when you catch the ball?
Yeah. Although I do see these things that they do. I'm like, but hey, can't they do that? They don't know how to do that. Anyway, it's been awesome. I've enjoyed it. And just highlighting it. So I was hoping maybe you could just kind of give us a quick rundown on WomHub, just what do you do and what kind of inspired the story to get it started?
Okay, thank you. So WomHub has actually been going for 17 years now. Started by 2 founders, Hema and Nadia, both engineers. They realized at university they found each other, and there were not many other people in the room that looked like them. Women of color in engineering, in STEM. And that ignited that movement on how do we get more women into STEM field. So the first we call Bobby being in product, the first product at market, but really the first iteration of WomHub was WomEng, and that's our talent vertical now. So talent looks at igniting the interest in girls and women into STEM careers. So girls being primary school, high school girls, and getting them interested, knowing what STEM means, what are the opportunities, how do I enter, what's required of me, and really igniting that interest. And we run workshops from building robotics through to building, putting on your engineer's hat and building, and literally we have pink hard hats, and building cars and teams, going through coding, and really just understanding what does the STEM vertical mean or STEM fields mean. And that's about igniting the interest in girls entering STEM careers. The WomEng part of that, so talent and women, is about supporting tertiary women, TVET, university, learnerships, internships, studying within technology, STEM field. So, and for us, STEM, and always good to clarify that, the traditional M is mathematics, but for us it's science, technology, engineering, and then mining and manufacturing. And we do a lot within mining and manufacturing. So how do women who are going into these fields, how do we support their tertiary education and then support their early career development, entering, retention into this, really being able to speak to those specific needs that women have within STEM careers? So that was our first vertical. We have entrepreneurship, which is grown organically as our fellows, and we are now starting to see the first fellows that were girl engers. So they were ignited interest in engineering. They went through, or in STEM, they went through engineering at university. They've worked up their career as an engineer in the field or in STEM in the field. And now they're going like, actually, now it's my time for entrepreneurship. And we've grown from that. We've actually, at the moment, I've got a team from Fundamentals she was one of our women's fellows. And she's now in the Standard Chartered Women in Tech program. So we really are excited to be able to see our narrative growing with our founders and our fellows. But entrepreneurship is about incubation and acceleration, focus on women in very thematic areas. So women in engineering, women in mining, women in green technology, women in software, and women in technology, and really focused needs on what do you need to unlock those barriers as a female founder within that specific focus. We work with partners to bring about this in each theme and really unlocking the value chain that each partner brings. We then have our spaces vertical, so looking at innovation spaces, co-working spaces, but more than co-working spaces. So we have high emphasis on technology and democratizing access to technology for women. We've got a partnership with Cisco that is launching and really allows the opportunity to deep tech labs, to technology that you wouldn't ordinarily have access to. So allowing that access to technology in an innovation space that also takes into account being a woman, right? Flexible workspaces, flexible needs, lactation lounges for our women that are still breastfeeding. We've got our junior engineer hubs for women that wanting to still bring their kids to work. So really allowing that flexible space as well as allowing access to innovation and technology. So that's talent, entrepreneurship, spaces, and then our last vertical is funding. And none of this is accessible is an option without access to funding. And we know this, and often enough at market, everyone says it's access to funding, but we have such interesting funding conversations in our entrepreneurship vertical because we've got traditional ventures, traditional SMMEs. So looking at, for example, some of the mining startups or scale-ups, some of the engineering startups or scale-ups, and they won't be seen as the VC model. So how do you have that access to funding? And then the ventures model, which is a VC model. So our funding arm, which is 535, speaks to Series A and seed rounds, so within ventures. And again, kind of that access to funding allows and unlocks all of these opportunities to happen.
That's incredible. Renia, it's no surprise, when we go to these startup events and, anything that's around the city, that's around tech and startups, the ratio of male to female in a room the ratio is horrendous. So there's definitely a need for this. Just your take on kind of the WomHubs of the city, of the world, that is trying to change that kind of outlook.
Yeah, I think something that excites me about this year's Women's Month is the fact that it seems like the whole movement is maturing to a level where, you have a lot of people that are not, I think a few years ago, a lot of people were angry, and rightfully so to a certain degree. But I believe a lot of women are now not angry. They're just rising up and building great things. And that for me is encouraging to see. So the argument is less about we have to make everything 50-50 and more about let's just create opportunities and spaces to build, to give females the opportunity to step into those careers or build businesses that they want to. And I think that seeing that get to that point is quite exciting, because now you're really seeing people doing some amazing things and getting great opportunities. So yeah, it's definitely, I think it is going to change. I think something that I found interesting is, how do we determine what the target is, Robbie? Because is it 50-50? I walk around at my kid's school and, the demographic there is 90% female, 10% male. So should teachers also be 50-50? I don't think so. So I don't know, Vo, do you know, what is the target we should be aiming for?
For me, there isn't an exact target in equality. It's it's not closing opportunities for any gender. And I'm specifically speaking about a gender lens because I'm there, but with gender, race, religion, whatever it may be, it's not to close opportunities because of that. It's allowing opportunities in spite of your gender in this case. So I don't think there's an exact answer on we want 50-50. But I think, it's interesting. So one of our portfolio companies, Digitizers, actually supports supports teachers at market, upskilling teachers. And actually they're seeing a large amount of, majority of their teachers are women. And most of, now I don't know the exact data of 80% or whatever it may be, but majority of the management in the schools is male. So what creates that gender disparity? And that's quite an interesting, as you're saying, walking around the schoolyard. And I am lucky enough, I suppose, it's about a work-life choice, not work-life balance. But our work-life choice at home is that my career, we made a decision on whether or not we moved. My husband decided that he had retired his career and he was quietening down. So he does all the school runs, not me. And it's quite interesting. So you say it's changing, right? But he has actively, and myself have actively been attacked by friends of ours on the choice in gender roles in our family. Friends have come up to me and gone like, how can Dom be the stay-at-home? Now he's actually a student. He's gone back to first year. He's a 50-year-old first-year student. But, until then it was like, how can Dom be a stay-at-home dad? That's your right to be a stay-at-home mom. Why is he doing all the school runs? Why is he doing all of that? That's your job. That's your right. And women and men have come up to me saying that. Kind of the guys to Dom and go like, that's amazing. You get to retire. Like, high five. What are you doing? He's like, whatever I want. Meanwhile, he should be doing parenting.
Playing golf.
But it's quite interesting that you think it's changing and there is movement. I'm not downplaying it, but there is still active work that needs to be done to challenge these norms that we place on our communities.
No, I agree with that. So I just want to go back to the STEM because we've had that conversation on our podcast a few times now and it's been in the newsletter as well. There is, whether it's male or female, there is a definite shortage in STEM education within the country. So how are you as WomHub inspiring or igniting that STEM as you described? Like, how are you getting the interest into these young females?
So I think, it hasn't changed much since we were all at school. When you looked at your decisions and they're like, what are you going to come? A doctor, a nurse, a school teacher? Like there wasn't like lists of options, right? So even just challenging that, like what does STEM mean? We have an Ask the Engineer session with each one of our engagements, and that's about speaking and having like-minded individuals from those communities in these sessions and being able to say, what are the options? How do I get into these? Like, what are my choices in studying? I might not want to go to university, or I might not qualify. What can I get in a TVET college? What is a TVET college? What subjects should I be looking at doing? So there's a theoretical understanding part of that, of what are my opportunities, as well as a practical and experiential part. How do I do coding for one day? And we run these innovation camps, but technovation camps. How do I do coding? How do I do robotics? How do I build prototypes? How do I pitch businesses? And really there's that piece of theoretical learning, but also just that experiential to ignite the interest in going like, oh, I could actually do something in this field. And let me hold on to this subject because it will get me there.
That's cool. I agree. I don't think that it's pushed enough. I mean, even just like tech, businesses and entrepreneurship in general is just a lacking thing. But Renier, you had a bit of a question that you posed for Vo before we started. Do you wanna dig in?
Sure. I think one of the things that I hear a lot in the startup spaces and accelerators, they say, if all the women are concentrated in one accelerator, then, obviously all of the other accelerators would not have a good female representation. And then, it reflects bad on them even because they also would love to have more representation, but there are only so many female founders out there. And I mean, if someone's doing an incredible program, all the females would want to go there. Like, what would you say to that? Or how does the future of acceleration look like? I mean, are we splitting it by gender, or are we looking to actually integrate it and get that value from that diversity?
So I don't think we've been in that startup, all three of us in that startup support space, and looking at how do we get our entrepreneurs into scale. But really, I think there isn't just answers for one program out there. There can be multiple programs, and I'm seeing a lot of I was with Naspers Labs before that I was with Mest, which is an African program. I've been with Alpha Code, which is RMI. I was there for 6 years, and I'm seeing teams come to all of those opportunities, and really each incubator or accelerator unlocks traction. That's all that we as the support structures want from you. Traction is forward movement. So how can we unlock that forward movement? So I don't think that a female focused accelerator is going to detract from other opportunities. The fact is you might want to do both opportunities, and they'll unlock barriers in two different spaces for you, and will both result in traction. So I wouldn't say the advice is to the entrepreneurs out there, don't say no to one because you see one that you want to get into, being WomHub or any other. Like, apply and see which ones will unlock the barriers and offer the opportunities that are correct for you at that time. And with all of that being said, I do see the need for, and this is me as my personal opinion, there is the need for female focused incubators and accelerators. And the reason being, the more I'm in the gender space, the more I am seeing the different role that women see in success in businesses. It might not be for scale to IPO one day. It might not be to get to my series rounds. It may actually be to build a good family business, and good being that subjective word, but it might be sustainable, family business, community orientated, whatever your goals are, and that is good enough. Now, often enough with more male orientated, and I say male and youth because I've changed since I had kids. I've changed. So there was Vo pre-kids. I think it's Vo in Victoria. When I became a mom, I changed to Victoria. But Vo pre-kids was hard. It's about scale, and it's about getting my metrics and raising funding and proving that girls can do it. And actually now, kind of having my family, having my kids, it's about being good enough. I want to be available for them on the weekends. I want to be have my afternoons available for kids and family and all of these things. So I think there's a difference that women often have with what does success look like. And if that's the case, it's to be sensitive of that and say, how do we support you with your thematic need? Are you in mining? Are you in engineering? Are you in tech, etc., right? Green, and the list goes on, because each one of them has a different focus for us at WomHub. And then kind of that focus on what does success look like as women? What is your business needs as a woman, as a female founder, and how can we support those unique needs? So you'll get something very different out of one of our programs as you would one of the other programs, and both play a very pivotal part on the growth of our founders.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I'm just thinking about when I was working at Sweep South, and Aisha had to go on maternity leave for 3-4 months. But the business had to continue. We had funding and things had to continue. So, what kind of supports do you put in for someone like that? That's, like the founder of a company, it's in a growth stage. How do they get support?
So, that comes back to that work life. It's not, for me, right? Vo's logic in life is that it's not actually about work-life balance. It's about work-life decisions. And a lot of female founders choose to go back to work. And that's the choice, right? They choose knowing that they're giving up the breastfeeding stages of with their kiddies, their babies. So they're going back to work. Or they are giving up I've given up the school drop-offs and all the PTA meetings. So that becomes the choice that we as female founders make. Tato from Zoe Health, so 2 female founders, Tato and Dr. Noni. Tato's actually just had a baby. I think must be about 10 weeks old now. I'm thinking about I saw her 2 weeks back. And I asked, could you come in, give her for one of our programs? She's a portfolio company. Can you give in a guest lecture and really speak about your product growth and your product journey? And I was very sensitive, do you mind coming in? You can bring your baby. I was actually excited because I wanted to give baby cuddles. I now have a big boy who's no longer cuddly. Sounds very excited. And she's like, no, I'm back at work, right? I'm back at work. That's my decision that I'm making. And it becomes about a work-life decision as opposed to work-life balance. And I think that, again, not speaking from the WomHub point of view, from my personal point of view, is that's actually how female founders land up tackling it. We have to decide where we want to prioritize that.
So in terms of the founders, right, so you're talking STEM, you're talking mining and engineering. I mean, it's a very specific kind of field. I mean, is there a different way that you approach it or not? I mean, at the end of the day, it's you know, it's getting into mining. You don't find a lot of females in mining or being at engineering, you know, conferences and things like that. So like, how do you kind of manage that and get them, you know, excited about it?
You know, I think there's a lot of females that go into mining. Just as any engineer will tell you, when you graduate from university, your first port is a mine. It's like that is the life path of an engineer, going onto the mines. And you know, for retention for women on mines, it's hard. It's really hard. It is a male dominated, it is a harsh environment. So there isn't often that retention. And you know, we're seeing quite a few females that are go into that as a vocation and then are changing careers. And how can we, what we look at is how do we support you in that retention, potentially within the field, if not just that space. So we have, and interesting across the board, there is a growing increase in founders being engineers. I think as engineers, you go into the field because you like to solve problems. And then you graduate and you realize that you're solving the same problem that every day that an engineer before you has solved every day. So engineers are actually increasingly becoming entrepreneurs. And so we're seeing this growth point of our female founders being engineers that went into engineering, mining, green economy, you know, like hard. And when I say green economy, not just the software side of it, but the actual, the agri side, the developing fuels, developing technologies, like that harder environments, and are actually wanting more out of that and seeing that growth into being entrepreneurs.
So another thing I see that you guys focus on is the secular sort of economy. Can you just explain that? Because I'd like to just dive into that a little bit.
When you look at circular, it's about minimizing. You do have inputs. You've obviously have those inputs, but it's about minimizing the waste production. And how do we look at a circular cycle that actually increases the life of a product, increases the reuse of a product, you know, decreases the impact on environment, and really looks at as little waste out and more reuse in.
One of my fears, Rainier, with looking into the circular kind of economy, it's margins. I try and understand how much money is there to be made when reusing items or like trying to improve the traditional way of doing things, because they're in place because it's profitable for the companies. So now trying to do, like, whenever they pick up my recycling, I wonder, like, how are they really making money out of, or how is that sustainable?
Well, I think there's a hidden cost which is often not calculated, and that is, you know, we're running out of space to dump stuff, and to you know, landfills are filling up. So, you know, at some point we're going to get to a place where there won't be any of those things anyway, and the cost would just become exorbitant. So, whilst it's not economically viable, I think some of the stuff that I've been involved in circular economy has certainly proven that, you know, it could be viable if it happens at scale, and if it's done substantially more efficiently. So at the moment, there's a lot of inefficiencies. And the scale is not there. Now, the nice thing is we all know that that's something that tech does really well, right? Tech is really good at making stuff more efficient, and it's also really good at, you know, making things scale. So I think, you know, a few years from now, you know, some of these people playing in the circular economy space are going to look like geniuses because they've been chipping away for it for the last 10 years, not really getting anywhere. And then at one point there'll be a tipping point and there'll be massive organizations doing really well. So, you know, it's all about like investing in something. It's taking a future view and saying, you know, in the future, you know, this stuff needs to change, and someone needs to start building this stuff, because in the future, when it changes, those companies would be worth quite a lot and make a massive contribution.
So if I was talking about like the struggle to get funding, how do you convince investors that this is a long-term game, Bo, considering you're in the micro lending space as well?
So I do. I love building lending products. I think, it's about unlocking, and similar to what Renee is saying, is that it's unlocking opportunity within the circular space. So if we look at, even from the design being, if you look at the circular value chain, so you've got design, production, distribution, consumption, reuse, and collection and recycling. Now, if you look at just the design, if you design a process with circularity in mind, you're unlocking that commercial opportunity. So one of our products, for example, one of our founders' products, one of our portfolio companies, does biofuel from used cooking oil. So you can run your generator, your tractor, any diesel machinery on reused cooking oil. Now that designing that in mind, that I'm going to use this cooking oil for my factory, my restaurant, whatever it may be, and there's actually a value to designing it better so that I can on-sell that unused cooking oil, because there's a market out there. So really about understanding the commercials of going circular, and not just thinking that it is environmental and that's it, right? There's actually the commercial value in that full cycle of that value chain. But that being said, access to funding, that was your original question. I think, there's access, right? There is difficulty in finding it, but when you understand what type of funding you are looking for, that's when you know what opportunities to access. There should be more opportunities for funding. I'm not saying that that it's an easy one, but often enough, I find some of our entrepreneurs, my entrepreneurs in my journey, have come up and said they don't have access to funding. So you unpack and you say, okay, well, what funding are you looking for? They're like, no, we actually are a lender. We need access to on-lend. So I said, okay, so you're looking for funding for a book. That's a very different ask on going to a VC or going to a bank or going to a micro lender. You're now actually looking to on-lend and therefore need to fund a book. That's got a different market model. That's got a different considerations. So really, I think it's always about understanding what funding opportunities are you looking for, and being able to design and develop around that so you can speak to and validate that opportunity.
Is there any kind of product or something in the supply chain that is inspiring any of you too? So something that you've heard of and like that's an opportunity that should be exploited. Do you guys have any examples that we could share with the audience?
Got one up my sleeves that I'm working on.
Please, are you allowed to share what's up that sleeve?
I will share, because if someone's able to solve it, they must come and tell me, because there's opportunity. But what's really interesting at the moment is this alignment with ESG and ESD. Now ESD in South African environment is enterprise and supplier development, which is a regulated BBBE scorecard section. So there is an alignment with ESG, being environmental social governance, along with the ESD. And out of that, what I've actually seen is this opportunity to convert green credits. So looking at carbon offsets, how do we convert the green credits into opportunities for our traditional and green, so green ventures, traditional SMMEs within the green space? How do we actually convert those offsets, instead of being dumped onto the voluntary carbon markets? So you've got regulated and voluntary. Instead of dumping it onto a voluntary carbon market, how do we actually use those carbon offsets and invest directly into our community businesses, and be able to calculate and capture those offsets through the various standards that are the methods of certifying that? So often enough, we see incredible carbon capturing opportunities, but they're expensive to register for standards, and kind of the older standards or gold standards. There's now more innovative standards that are out, but it's expensive. It takes time. You have to have a high skill set to navigate all of this. So unless you have that skill set, how do you go about accessing that? And what opportunities are there that allow smaller ventures, traditional SMMEs, businesses in our communities that are building biofuels, that have access to clean water, all of these incredible opportunities, and give them access to carbon offsetting credits? I'd like to see that someone answer that. And if not, I'm going to try to answer it myself.
What would be the first step?
figuring out the standards, because it is, when you see big corporates saying, or companies saying that they've got carbon neutral, it means that they've gone through that regulated space, and now the regulated carbon market, and now they're looking at the voluntary carbon market to offset and get that neutrality. Now it's about understanding. So for me, it's about actually I've got access to entrepreneurs in the green space and access to corporates who want to get closer towards a carbon neutrality. Now it's actually about looking at a repeatable model of measuring and regulation within those standards.
Okay. Isn't that what Elon Musk did with Tesla? Tesla wasn't profitable, but they were getting the credit scores. Isn't that so, Renee? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah. No, I mean, he was very creative in how he used the different tax credits and rebates and, using the different states to make sure they make progress on it. And I think there's still a lot of those opportunities around. But Bobby, you speak about like opportunities in the space. Like, the kind of players that I really like is, if you think about this space, there's going to be a lot of development going forward, right? Lots of different types of plants that do recycling, a lot of production plants that do production in a specific way. But just underneath that, there's a support layer of software or hardware that's going to support all of these businesses, right? SaaS software, if you will, ERP SaaS software for the circular economy. And often those businesses have substantially less risk and less input capital to get going. So they don't have to, put up large facilities or go through the effort of being a first mover in a market. They simply just supply the software. So they have substantially lower risk. There's a large opportunity for scale. And if you start building those things right now, you can be first to market. So there is a startup that's already doing something in that space called Kudoti, Gift and Matthew. They're busy building, ERP software for the circular economy. And I think they're onto something because, as these facilities start popping up, all of them are going to look, what kind of software can I use? And you either use something that is ported from a different industry and it's not focused really on what you're doing, or, you can grab hold of that. And I like that because it's lower risk, much more scale, and very practical, very easy in terms of marketing and sales, or easier at least than ever because it's such a niche. You can get quite in there and get traction. So yeah, I'm excited to see more of those popping up.
Are you kind of explaining like tracking stuff? So being able to say this came from this place and now we're going to take it there. When I mean that is not literally logistics, but being able to track that it is a reused item, whether it's paper or something like that. Is that what
amongst other things? Yeah. So one of the requirements of a lot of these organizations is saying, look, let's say an organization that does beverages put a lot of bottles out there, and they actually want to track like how many of those bottles do they recollect and actually recycle and reuse. So that's one element of it. The other side of it is all of these plants that facilitate some of these processes. They need ERP software to actually optimize their systems. I mean, one of the examples is you need practical things. If you power up those ovens to do the recycling, they're quite expensive, right? Now, if you don't have a constant flow of recyclable material that comes into this plant, you have to switch them off and switch them back on again, right? So every second that thing stands still or gets powered off and powered back on is actually a massive loss of income. So what you'd love to see, with better planning, more efficiency, better ERP, ERP software that can just help them manage this. They can optimize the amount of income they can generate through those processes. And that software can add a substantial amount of value and revenue, and increase margins to the extent that they can justify quite a premium in order to exist. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. There's some big international players building things, but I've seen often when people zone in on niches in Africa, they can build really practical software that really gets the way a South African business operates. And they can do that at a tenth of the cost of an international player, and they can literally capture the entire market because there's so few people that actually set out to build software like this in South Africa, because everybody thinks there are international players like SAP and some of these other guys that have massive systems and they'll just come in here, which isn't untrue, but the reality is if you're local, you have agility, flexibility, and a cost advantage. So a lot of opportunity in that space.
Yeah. I like that. I've never really thought about it. But any last thoughts on that? I know you're also into design thinking and things like that. So kind of validating those kind of ideas. What would you do and how would you advise someone a young female that's watching this and listening to this to say, well, that sounds exciting. I know something in my community that would benefit from something like this. How would they, what's the next step for them to go validate these ideas?
So I think, as founders, and I speak I've been a founder, I am a founder myself. So we often, our first idea, we think that this is our scalable idea, and we get quite married to that idea. And the advice is be willing to shift and change. And you're experiencing a pain point. And entrepreneurship is about solving for a pain at market. But you've identified that pain point. It is okay if your first solution is not the solution that is going to scale. And honestly, I can tell you that very few of my portfolio companies are those first solutions. There is always an opportunity to iterate, to test, to go back to basics and design basics and reflect on that for your best opportunity at scale and being able to solve for that pain. So that's always the advice on we are quick to see a pain and go straight to MVP. And if you ever come into one of my programs, you'll go through a venture clinic with me. You go through understanding stages and what validating for each stage means. But we're so quick to say I've got the answer, and you go to MVP and you want to build and sell. And actually you suddenly realize, well, no one's buying. Why aren't they buying? And then you go back to those design basics. So be kind to yourself in that journey. I think every entrepreneur out there has gone ideation MVP, right? And there's loads of steps in between. And suddenly you go like, okay, right, let me go back. Let me start testing. Who's my customer? Who's my consumer? Who's buying? Who's using? And we start going through that design process. So be kind to yourself in that journey. And if that is you thinking about, oh, I've got this pain, look into design, right? Look into the design process. Speak to your customers, find out who your customer and your consumer is, look at your models, and really do that early work, because it'll help you later on. And if you didn't do that early work, it's okay to redo that work. That's perfectly fine. And I think most entrepreneurs at market have been in that. We all go straight to MVP. So be kind to yourself on that journey and do the early design work.
Yeah, I like that. It's that empathy, right? It's the first stage of design thinking. Let's go and understand. Let's go understand the users, the customers, and understand firsthand.
Yeah, I have one more question.
Please go.
So Vo, let's say all of this work that we're putting in to get women more excited about STEM and entrepreneurship, bears fruit, and we fast forward a few years, and the richest person in the world is a South African woman. And there's an American woman who, out of varsity, built a massively successful social network. And that woman then copies an app of this South African woman. Do you think these two CEOs would settle it in an octagon, in a cage match, fighting each other like we are seeing at the moment?
Musk.
Open gloves or closed gloves?
I don't know. It depends, I guess.
Well, you are actually speaking one of my many past lives, right? The Vo Jackson versus Victoria Harris. Victoria Harris is a businesswoman who's very parate, and you'll see her at conferences and is quite collected. Vo Jackson was a bit of a messy entrepreneur herself, straight miss everything, straight to MVP, straight to scale, and was actually a boxer for a small time in my life. I did professional boxing. So you're speaking to my heart when you speak about fighting. Never really got to cage fighting, a bit too stressful for me, but am a boxer actually in my old days.
That's awesome.
So
I found your comment earlier so encouraging, actually, and actually so I'm quite excited about the comment when you said, women often define success differently. So when it comes to this traditional patriarchal man's world, it's all about ego and who has the bigger ego, and if we can't solve it in the business world, let's take it to the octagon, which I on the one hand, it's kind of fun and entertaining. On the other hand, it actually just showcases the ridiculousness of what this has become. So I think it would be interesting to see in the future how these things play out when we have more female CEOs.
Yeah. And I think, reflecting on that, success is different for women. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't mean that if you're a female founder and you want to scale an IPO, there is something wrong with you, right? There are different stages, different seasons, different all of that. But I definitely think women see success differently. And often, as a founder myself, what I thought, where I realized I didn't actually want, I raised and I had VCs because that's what you do. And suddenly I didn't really want that. So I thought I had failed because I didn't want what was expected of me as a founder at market. So I think just being aware of what does success look like helps kind of create that path for female founders. It might be okay to not raise funding. You might not want to have investors on your board. You might want to. What does it look like? Often enough, debt funding is cheaper in cost because of that ability to sure, it might be more expensive short term, but longer term you might be able to retain that business structure that you wanted, in which case that's right for you. But to be clear on what your success metric looks like.
Awesome.
Okay, cool. So this time it is goodbye.
Right.
Thank you for joining us, and enjoy your Women's Day, and keep up the good work. It's really needed, and we'll see you again.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for now.
Cheers.
Cheers, everyone.